Hello, and welcome to Using the NGSS Interim Assessments in the Classroom. This is Ron Michaels, the K-12 Science Consultant from the Connecticut State Department of Education. I'll be your guide and narrator for today's journey as we look a little closer at the CSDE NGSS Interim Assessments. Let's begin by looking at our agenda to give you an understanding of what this presentation will cover. We are looking at different ways to use the NGSS Interim Assessments. We're going to provide you with some ideas about using either the science interim items or the results of the NGSS blocks in a variety of ways other than the traditional give the test, get the scores manner. We will dive a bit deeper into the AIRWays reporting system developed by our testing vendor, American Institutes of Research, or AIR. And finally, toward the end of today's presentation, I'll provide you with a list of resources and contact information for myself and another key player in the development of the NGSS Interim Assessments, my colleague and professor of all things science assessment, Jeff Gregg. These are the learning targets for this presentation. Our goal is that you leave here and understand how you can use NGSS Interim Assessments data to support student learning and understand how the NGSS Interim Assessments and the associated systems can be used as tools to support professional development and classroom instruction. Although this initial webinar is designed as an overview, CSDE plans are to continue this initial look at NGSS Interim Assessments with a more defined and detailed dive into creative ways to use the Interim Assessment blocks, IABs, in two follow-up webinars delineated by grades K-5 and then the 6 to 12 grade bands. So, let's look at the Interim Assessments blocks. First, a word from our ever-present legal department. All use of the NGS Interim Assessments must abide by the CSDE Non-Disclosure Agreement, which states all interim assessments are classified as non-secure, non-public. These materials, for example, items, stimuli, and scoring assertions cannot be posted publicly, reproduced for commercial purposes, or sold. These materials may be used for the purposes of improving teaching practices in the classroom, used for training district educators, or as a tool to work with students in a variety of non-traditional activities. Again, in subsequent webinars, we will discuss in more detail using the NGSS Interim Assessment blocks in more non-traditional ways. Like our other interim assessments, this resource is free, and more importantly, it's optional. We believe that interims are a great way to check student progress and to gather information about learning that can alter the instruction provided. We see interims as a valuable tool for students to practice addressing the three dimensions of NGSS in the same online platform with the same tools and item types that will be used for the summative assessment. As we will see, students can receive feedback from their performance in a variety of ways. Science interims offer flexibility that can be used for professional development or in class with students in a variety of different ways. The State Department of Ed is not dictating if or when you use these interims, but we will caution you to keep in mind the purposes and the appropriate uses of these assessments. The NGSS Interim Assessment blocks measure a subset of science practices, disciplinary core ideas, and cross-cutting concepts. Each block contains two item clusters aligned to two different NGSS performance expectations from various topic areas. For example, forces in motion, ecosystems, or earth systems. Students should take approximately 15 to 20 minutes to complete each interim block. As a review, let's consider the following. How are the interim assessments delivered? Well, like the summative assessment, the interims are delivered on a computer using the test administrator and student interface. They include a variety of item types to elicit specific skills. All the items on these assessments are machine scored. Are the NGSS interim assessments adaptive? No. Similar to the summative, the interim assessments are currently not adaptive. However, as additional items are added to the interim assessment bank, interim assessments may have the capability of becoming adaptive at some future date and time. How are the interim assessments scored? Items on all the science interim assessments are scored by the computer. All items ask students to use a variety of science and engineering practices and apply their understanding of disciplinary core ideas and cross-cutting concepts to make sense out of real-world phenomena. They consist of collections of questions that measure capacities such as depth of understanding and the ability to apply complex analysis, which cannot be adequately assessed with traditional assessment questions. Prior to using the interims, you might want to think about your goals and visions. What purpose do the interim assessments serve in your classroom? How you use IAB should determine how you will prepare your students to take the interim assessments. Will you be using the IABs for student evaluation or monitoring student progress? It makes sense to take a unit of design or a portion of your curricula to see how the IABs align to your instruction. Compare your curricula to the recently released NGSS assessment blueprints or review blocks on the assessment viewing application or AIRWays to determine the alignment with your units of study. How will you use the data from these assessments? As mentioned, the science interims can be used in a variety of ways to support educational learning opportunities with your teachers or use them to support class instruction. They can be administered as standalone assessments. They can be accessed by educators for the purposes of professional development by exploring examples of phenomena-based three-dimensional science assessment. They can be used with individual students or the whole class through modeling or instructional classroom practice. They can support the teaching of specific science and engineering practices, cross-cutting concepts, or specific disciplinary core ideas. They are an excellent way to provide student exposure to a variety of item types in an online testing situation. And lastly, data from the AIRWays reporting system can help educators identify areas of strength as well as problem areas to help determine intervention and next steps. There are 27 NGSS Interim Assessment blocks representing Earth, Life, and Physical Science. Each block contains 2 clusters. In grades 3 to 5, there are 7 different blocks containing a total of 14 clusters. In grades 6 through 8, there are 10 different blocks for a total of 20 clusters. And lastly, in grades 9 through 11, you will find 10 different blocks for a total of 20 clusters. While at the moment, not all of the NGSS performance expectations are assessed through the interims, more items will likely be added in the future. Teachers can securely log into the assessment viewing application, AIRWays, to review the blocks without having to take the test using the secure browser. Answers to the items are available in AIRWays or in AIRWays. Training guides and step-by-step videos are available on the Connecticut Assessment Portal. We have provided hyperlinks to the portal and many of the resources referenced at the end of this presentation. This slide identifies the items you will find at the elementary grade band 3 to 5. Like all NGSS nomenclature, the first number determines the corresponding grade or grade band. The letters that follow indicate the discipline content area of PS for physical science, LS for life science, or ESS for earth and space science, and the last number is the corresponding performance expectation. Here you will see the items that you will find at the middle school grade bands 6 to 8. as indicated by the letters MS. And finally, this slide identifies the items you will find at the high school grade band 9 to 12, as indicated by the letters HS. Almost all the accommodations and designated supports offered on the NGSS Summative Assessment are also available on the NGSS Interim Assessment. The exceptions are there are no Braille forms, and the NGSS Interim IABs are not available in Spanish. Item clusters present students with stimuli and tasks using a split screen format. On the left, students begin with a stimulus based on a real-world phenomena. The stimulus might include data or diagrams, maps or tables that will be used by students in completing the task presented. On the right side of the screen, students will see multiple items, all of which correspond to the stimulus. The next two slides are examples of the available sample items which are not test secure. This is an example of what you might expect to see in a typical middle school interim assessment item. Again, with the stimulus or phenomena and the assigned task on the left side of the screen and the items on the right, many of the stimuli are simulations of phenomena found in the real world. Click on the yellow play button on the screen to show how fog forms in the Willamette Valley. This is an example of what you might expect to see in a typical high school interim assessment item. Again, with the stimulus or phenomena and the assigned task on the left side of the split screen and the items on the right. This set of simulations are two examples of chemical reactions. Students can see the reaction of lithium and then sodium when added to water and use their observations to respond to the items on the right. Again, click on the play button on the screen to see the two chemical reactions. The NGSS interim assessment blocks can be used as more than just traditional interim assessments. Blocks can be used to model understanding, analyzing or constructing explanations. They can support teachers in clearly stating expectations, which benefits all learners in the classroom and will complement a lesson, facilitate productive conversation, or enhance knowledge. The interim assessment supporting systems such as AVA and AIRWays can be used to assist with professional development. In a classroom setting, they can be used for pre-teaching, lesson planning, formative assessment, and post-teaching follow-up. In the webinars following this overview, we will present a number of ways to integrate the interim assessments into classroom instruction. Student responses to NGSS interim item clusters are scored as either correct or incorrect, using a series of scoring assertions associated with each cluster. Each scoring assertion is a statement of performance expected of students that reflects one or more dimensions assessed by the cluster. Here are a few examples of scoring assertions from the fog cluster shown earlier. Performance on these assertions will provide insight into students' understanding of the core idea and practice of creating graphs. Results on the scoring assertions are available for individual students and groups of students for each interim cluster through AIRWays. We will explore using the results of scoring the interims on the slide that follow. Teachers can securely log into the assessment viewing application, AVA, to review the blocks without having to take the test using the secure browser. Answer to the items are available in AVA or in AIRWays. Training guides and step-by-step how-to videos are available on the Connecticut Assessment Portal. We have provided hyperlinks to the portal, and many of the resources referenced appear again at the end of this presentation. We'd like to encourage you to look past the charts full of numbers and the category labels and really dig into the items themselves. Here are some questions that could be asked. Were there items that all your students struggle with? Were there items that all your students did well on? Are there any patterns in the way they responded? Where are the outliers, items that all but a few students did well on? What instruction would benefit those few students? Were there trends in answers based on particular types of items? Does it look like students know what to do with technology-enhanced items like graphing or drop-down multiple choice items? How are they handling the multi-select items, which allow them to choose more than one correct answer? When you open AIRWays to the dashboard page, you will see a list of the interims taken by students on your roster. If you have not rostered your students and need to know how, the link to a quick guide explaining that is at the end of this presentation. The test can be ordered alphabetically, and once you locate the interim block you want to analyze, you will want to view the overall scores on the block. The blue box you see shows the average score of all the students who took the block. You might want to review blocks by content or begin with one where overall students did not meet the expectation in the standards. The red box provides the number of students who took the block and are rostered to you. By clicking on the underlined name of the assessment block, you will see all your students who took that specific block and their individual scores. This page allows you to see the individual student performance on each item within an item cluster and provides an average of the group performance on the cluster as a whole. Each item within the cluster and the overall performance on that block. Under the student column, you see the name Everyone. This is the average score of the group on this block overall and for each item. The underlined numbers in the top row will allow you to see the cluster of items. Results showing how students performed on each question within the cluster are also available, and by clicking on the I in the circle, you can see the scoring assertion for that specific item. So 1-1 and 1-2 are the different items within that first cluster. Then, by clicking the name of a student, which is the dark blue box to protect the student identities in this presentation, you can see their individual performance on any block. Similar to the prior screen, I can review the item cluster in its entirety by clicking on the underlined 1 or 2 in the top row. I can see how this child performed and compare that performance to those students on the same roster. The 2 blue arrows highlight the individual's overall score on the block, and the roster average on the block. In reviewing a student's response, I am given two tabs, an item and score tab, and a rubric and resources tab. The item and score tab allows me to see the scoring assertions for the cluster, and a chart informs me if the student met each expected outcome or not. For example, the student did not correctly identify the change in amplitude shown in the simulation. They were unable to provide evidence of their ability to observe and summarize wave changes in different media. As a starting point in working through the data on AIRWays, several questions start to become apparent. After reading an item in a cluster, ask yourself what the item is measuring. Is it a difficult item? What content does the student need to know in order to answer the questions? When you are teaching this content in your classroom, have the students been exposed to the construct-relevant vocabulary? In the specific grade-specific webinars, more explicit examples of appropriate uses of the IABs will be demonstrated. Next Generation Science Standards Interim Assessments are free, optional resources. We believe that the interims are one way to check student progress and to gather information about learning that can alter the instruction provided. The Connecticut Assessment Portal has a plethora of information on all of our summative assessments. If you do not currently receive the weekly student assessment newsletter, we recommend that you sign up for that. All of the user guides are available on the Connecticut portal and are hyperlinked here. For information in depth about AIRWays, please refer to the AIRWays user guide. If you need more information about student and user management, rosters, and/or appeals, see the TIDE user guide. For information about administering online tests, see the Test Administrator user guide. If you are unsure about network, internet, and software requirements, see the Technicals Specification Manual for online testing. Additional resources include the item specification documents, which outline the organization of the K-12 science framework. It includes details about item clusters and align each performance expectation to the 3 dimensions and possible phenomena. The performance expectation and associated evidence statements are followed by a coordinating list of task demands. Jeff and I are always available to answer questions regarding anything NGSS. The best way to reach either of us is through email, as our work around the state takes us out of the office on many days. Thank you for spending some time with us looking a little closer at using the CSDE NGSS Interim Assessments, and we look forward to recording more in-depth uses of NGSS Interim Assessment blocks.